Howdy there, Internet students. It's Mr. Hermanson again. Today we're going to learn how to solve equations by elimination. This is my favorite method, by the way. I love it. I use it the most when I'm solving system of equations. I even have this trick I use on my calculator that using elimination, I can get my calculator to find the answers for me. Maybe someday I'll show you that. But anyway, so look at this first problem here. It says the corner store is having a sale on flip-flops and sunscreen. 2 bottles of sunscreen and a pair of flip-flops cost $16, while 3 bottles of sunscreen and 2 pair of flip-flops cost $28. So let's let the sunscreen, the cost of sunscreen, be X and the cost of flip-flops be Y. So here we have 3 X's and 2 Y's. So we have the two equations are 2X plus 1Y is $16. And then we have 2 pair, 3 sunscreen and 2 pair of flip-flops cost $28. And what we would like to know is how much is the sunscreen, how much are the flip-flops? Well, we're going to use this thing called elimination. And here's what I'd like you to think about. If this top row, we just doubled it. Instead of buying 2 sunscreens and 1 flip-flop for $16, what if we would have bought 4 sunscreen and 2 flip-flops? And that would have been double the price, $32, right? Well, now, the reason I did that is because now I have the exact same number of flip-flops in my price. So, and the difference between my purchases, here I got 4 bottles of sunscreen, here I got 3 bottles of sunscreen, is 1 bottle of sunscreen. So 1 bottle of sunscreen must be the difference in the price between the 32 and the 28, which is $4. So just using a little logic got us to the point where we knew how much a bottle of sunscreen is. Well, now that I know that the sunscreen was $4, I can use any of these things to help me figure out how much the flip-flops are, which is Y. So this part here is actually $8, 2 sunscreens, plus a pair of flip-flops is $16. So that means that the flip-flops must be $8, right? So I've just figured everything out, and I did that by, really what I did here is I subtracted this group from this group. And that's what we're going to do in this lesson. Okay, so sometimes we're going to add, sometimes we're going to subtract. Like in this first set of equations, notice that you have a minus 6y here and a plus 6y here. Well, if you add a negative 6y to a positive 6y, you get 0. And what happens when you do that is you end up with only x left over when you subtract or when you add those together. So I'm going to just add these two together. That gives me 8x. And the negative 6y and the 6y cancel, so that's 0. And then negative 32 plus 48 is 16. Now it's really easy to solve. Just divide by 8, and we get x equals 2. One thing that's a little bit harder in this system is going back to figure out what y equals. You have to use one of the equations. Doesn't really matter which one you use. I just pick whichever one I think looks simpler. And this one here looks simpler to me because it's all positive numbers. There's no negatives. So I know that x is 2. I'm going to just do a little substitution, put 2 right there where the x is. That's 3 times 2 is 6. Now I just have to figure out what y is. To do that, I'm going to do 48 minus 6, which is 42, and then I'm going to divide that by 6, and that gives me 7. So my answer is 2, 7. Now I just want to do one last check and make sure those two numbers work in the top equation also. So I'm going to do 5 times 2 minus 6 times 7. And I hope that equals this number right here, negative 32. So that's 10 minus 42, which, yeah, it's negative 32, all right. So good. All right, why don't you try that? So start by adding the two equations together because you have a positive 4x and a negative 4x right there. Just add them together. That'll get rid of the x's, and then you can figure out what y is. So good time to pause, do a little work, and I'll check back. Well, I hope that went well for you. You should have got to x is 7, y is negative 1 for your answer. That works out. All right. I'm going to skip this and I'm going to do this problem on the video lesson for tomorrow. So we're just going to move. All right, let's go down to number 4 here. Sometimes they don't work out perfectly for doing elimination. What you can do when that happens is you can just like multiply, or you could divide. There's a lot of things you can do, but if you look at these two equations right here, if you add them together or subtract them, you're still going to have an x and a y. You need to either have opposite numbers for coefficients, like 4 and negative 4, or the same number, then you can subtract, like I did on the flip-flop problem. And remember on the flip-flop problem how I doubled the one so that I could have matching numbers? Well, that's kind of what we're going to be doing here. What I'm thinking here, and this is kind of a trick that will always work. If I multiply this top equation by 3, and I multiply the bottom equation by 4, which is the exact numbers that are there, then they'll both be 12x, and I can subtract. Now, personally, I'd rather add, so I'm just going to change it up a little bit. I'm going to multiply the top row by 3 and the bottom row by negative 4. Now, this is really cool. So the whole top row by 3 gives me 12x plus 9y equals negative 57. And multiplying the whole bottom row by negative 4 gives me negative 12x. Now that's what I wanted. Notice I have opposites there now. Negative 2 times negative 4 is positive 8y. Negative 10 times negative 4 is 40. Okay, now if I add these together, the x's are eliminated. So I get 17y equals negative 17. Dividing by 17 gives me y equals negative 1. Okay, now I know that y is negative 1. I'm just going to go back and pick my favorite equation to find the x of the two original equations. And I like this one better. So now I'm going to put this negative 1 where the y is here. I'm going to do 4 times x plus 3 times negative 1. That's negative 3. I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And that gives me negative 16 dividing by 4 gives me negative 4. So there's my answer. X is negative 4, y is negative 1. Since I already used this equation, I'm just going to check this last equation, make sure it's good there. So I'm going to do 3 times my x, which is negative 4. This is a times here. 3 times x minus 2 times y, which is negative 1, equals hopefully negative 10. This is negative 12. Here we have a negative times a negative, which is a positive 2. And that works out. Negative 12 plus 2 is 10. So that's very cool. Got the right answer. All right, you're going to try the next one. The way you're going to do it is the easiest thing to do, I think, is just multiply the bottom by 2. Everything on the bottom by 2. That'll give you a negative 2x right here. And then you can add the two equations together. Give it a shot. All right. If you did that right, you should have gotten 4 and negative 1. One thing I know students forget is, so once we multiply this here, then we have to add the top equation to this new equation, and make sure you multiply everything by whatever number you're multiplying by when you do that. All right. Finding the numbers of solutions. We're going to use a graph to help us on this, but we're going to use elimination. If we graph it first, I'm just going to graph it real quick by using the intercepts. So if you remember using the intercepts, if I'm doing the top equation, if I put in 0 for x, y would have to be the number times 5, that equals 10, which is 2. If I put in 0 for y, x would have to be the number multiplied by -2, that equals 10, which is -5. So I get a point at 0, 2, and at -5, 0. And there's that graph. Sorry, my line's a little low. And then for the bottom equation, same thing. Put in 0 for x, y would be 4. Put in 0 for y, x would be -10. So we have -10, 0. And we have 0, 4. And if I draw that line, so here's the deal now. It looks like these lines are parallel. So I'm going to just do my elimination thing. Now, this one seems to be set up for subtracting. If I take -2 minus -2, that's 0x. So the x cancels. And 5 minus 5 is also 0. So the y's are gone. 10 minus 20 is -10. If I get 0 equals -10, which is a false statement. And when that happens, you say there's no solution. So the graph or solving it tells us there's going to be no solution here. All right, I'm going to have you do one problem. Give this a shot, graph it, see what it looks like to you, and then see if you can figure out what the answer is. It might be kind of weird. So I found out that it's really the same line. Now, actually, if we multiply everything on the top by 3, we get 3x plus 3y equals 12. You can see they're the exact same line. That means anything that solves one will solve the other. So there's an infinite number of solutions. And we call this kind of a system an identity system. All right? Yeah, now when you subtract it, you're going to get 0 equals 0, which is true. All right. So you're going to do some problems on your practice. Now remember, there's a lot of things in life you can't change, but your math skills are not one of them. Have a good day.